Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the biblical concept of Shabbat. And you might be surprised to find out it's about a whole lot more than just, taking a day off.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Shabbat is a day of rest, right? But what if rest is actually the wrong word? Most of us, when we think of Shabbat, we picture rest, relaxation, kicking back. But the original Hebrew reveals something, well, much deeper and way more active. It's like our modern idea of R&R has been kind of layered on top of the real biblical concept, and we need to peel that back to see what's really there.
So let's start with the word itself, Shabbat. It comes from a verb that means to cease or to stop. So right away, it's not primarily about resting, it's about stopping. It's this really active idea of desisting from something. And you see this elsewhere. In fact, the Torah uses a form of this very same verb in Exodus to command the Israelites to, get this, stop having leaven in their houses during Passover. It's a command to end an activity.
Okay, so if we're commanded to stop doing work, then we've got to ask what exactly is work? Because our modern idea, effort, your 9-to-5 job, that's not really what the biblical term malaka means. Malaka is something different. It's about creative acts. It's about tasks that express our mastery, our dominion over the physical world. And this is where it gets really interesting. The Torah actually makes a distinction between two types of labor. On one hand, you've got malaka, this creative craftsmanship. And fun fact, it even shares a root with the Hebrew word for king, melech. On the other hand, you have avodah, which is more like toil or service. Think servant, evek. So what's the difference? Well, you could, for example, move a super heavy sofa around your living room all day. You'd be exhausted for sure. But that's avodah, that's toil. It's not a prohibited act of malaka.
So that begs the question, right? How in the world do we know what actually counts as this prohibited creative craft, this malaka? I mean, we can't just guess. Well, it turns out the answer is hidden in plain sight, inside one of the most important construction projects in the entire Bible. And that blueprint, it's the building of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. This was the portable sanctuary they built in the desert. And here's the key. The 39 categories of creative acts that were used to build this physical holy space, well, those are the very same creative acts that we have to stop doing in order to build a holy space in time. So check out the flow here. God gives these super detailed instructions for building the tabernacle. He lists all the creative work, all the malaka that's involved. But then, right in the middle of it all, he throws in this tiny little word, asher, which basically means however. And that one word is a major pivot. It creates this huge contrast, an exception. It's like he's saying, do all this creative work. However, on the seventh day, you stop. All of it. And this just brilliantly drives the point home. The Bible uses the exact same Hebrew verb, asah, for make me a sanctuary and for make the Sabbath. Think about that. We are literally commanded to make the Sabbath. This is not passive resting. We are actively building Shabbat by stopping the very same actions that were used to build the tabernacle. Okay, so let's put this theory to the test. Does it actually hold up? Let's take a really specific, well-known prohibition, like carrying a burden on Shabbat. Where does the Torah actually say we can't do that? Let's see if we can trace it back to the tabernacle. So the prophet Jeremiah, he's crystal clear about this. He says, do not carry a burden on the Sabbath day. But look closely at what he says next. He says this was commanded to your fathers. So he wasn't making up some new rule here. No, he was just reminding the people of a commandment they'd already been given. And where did they get it? Well, you guessed it. The answer is right there in the tabernacle's construction. If you go back and look at that story, you'll find the source for this rule right there in the text.
So what happened was, the people were bringing all these contributions for the tabernacle, and they were so generous, they actually brought too much. So Moses had to step in and give a command to tell them to stop. And the text itself explicitly calls the act of bringing, of carrying these gifts, it calls it malaka. And that right there, that's the biblical anchor. That's why carrying something from a private domain, like your house, to a public domain is considered one of these prohibited creative acts on Shabbat.
Okay, but Shabbat isn't just about what we stop doing. We've spent a lot of time on the prohibitions, right? The malaka we're supposed to cease from, but that is only half the story. The Torah also gives us a positive command, something we are supposed to do on Shabbat.
So in the Ten Commandments, we're told to zachor the Sabbath day, which we translate as remember. But that Hebrew root, zachor, it means so much more than just a mental note. It's actually related to the word zakaru, which means to name or, get this, to make a verbal proclamation. It's a command to actually speak something into being. So see, this isn't just some mental game. It's not about just thinking, oh, it's Shabbat. No, this is a call to action. It's a command to make a verbal proclamation of the day's holiness. You have to declare it out loud.
And this idea gets reinforced later on. In Leviticus, Shabbat is called a mikra kodosh. Now, a lot of translations will say that means a holy convocation or a sacred assembly, which makes you think you have to have a big gathering. But the root word there, korah, it actually means to proclaim or to read aloud. So again, it's pointing to a verbal declaration, not necessarily a physical meeting. And this is exactly what the Jewish tradition of Kiddush is all about. It's a verbal statement, right? Usually made over wine, that sanctifies the day. It fulfills that Torah command to proclaim the Sabbath holy. It's a positive act of building the Sabbath, but this time with our words. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, it's that Shabbat is this incredibly profound way to participate with the Creator. By stopping our own creative work for one day a week, the very same kinds of actions that were used to build a physical sanctuary, we don't just rest, we actively build a sacred space in time. We acknowledge that there's an ultimate creator of the universe. So the real question isn't just, how do we rest? It's, how do we build a sanctuary?
Follow Yosef for more at mishnawalk.substack.com.